Howdy, folks. This is Chris White, and you're listening to Basic Business Advice. Today, Ken Hostetler is back with us.
Oh, yeah.
After a hiatus, he was arm twisted into being here. Ken is a partner at Eques. And Tyler Needing, who, as of this recording, is no longer a member of the Eques team, except as an independent contractor. Tyler's out doing Needing Media right now as a freelancer. So video, photography, audio, obviously, and all of that. And then our guest today is Lindsey Chupp. Lindsey is longtime friend, first-time caller of the podcast, and has worked with us for a number of years. Lindsey is a co-owner of Fierce Creative Solutions. They do marketing, branding, advertising, advising, consulting.
All of the things above.
All of the things.
Whatever you need us to do, sometimes more than you ask us to.
She comes and eats at my restaurant and tells me how to better advertise my restaurant. And she's awesome. So today we're going to talk to Lindsey about the far-ranging ideas around marketing and branding and anything we decide to land on at that point in time. So Lindsey, this morning you came to our mastermind. You talked about why people's marketing sucks.
I did.
And you told them to their face their marketing sucks and gave them a quiz where they had to evaluate themselves. And I passed the quiz, by the way.
Did you? You scored above a what?
I think it was like a 109 or 110. No, it was even numbers, so it was 110. So,
I don't think that's true because I know you're not using all those marketing channels.
all but one.
So what was the passing score? I don't know.
It was
Like
my
109.
Oh,
score. It was
nice.
my score.
Your score.
So
You're probably the only. Well, okay. So what was interesting is we ended up talking to a bunch of other marketers.
Right.
So maybe not exactly the target that it should have been, but it was a good way to test that because it'd be an interesting way to market ourselves and put that out there and say, hey, do you want to know how to assess your marketing? Mm-hmm. You guys are very forward thinking when it comes to your marketing. I mean, I've been able to witness that for the last couple of years, probably more than most law firms that I know.
yeah,
Yes.
that's like we would like to hear that. Better than most.
Well, actually, for me, better than all, because I don't ever see anything for anybody other than like sponsorships or
Misney.
their ad events. Tim Misney. Yeah, I mean, is he in your market?
His new ad is just his eyebrow.
I saw that. It's on a billboard driving up into Cleveland
Yep.
on 271.
Yep.
You know, coming around. It's just that eyebrow.
There's that one, and I just saw one the other night that said it was just his picture, and he was pointing, and it said, "You know what I do."
That
Wow.
is
Great.
solid.
Shoot.
That's solid brand.
I was
But
like,
how
"That's
long
so
has he
good."
been doing that?
Oh,
Since I
30
was a
years
kid.
probably,
Yes, it's been a long time.
yeah.
So, and even like our kids know what that is, but that's long brand equity, Chris. That's what I'm talking about. You think that he could always measure the ROI on all of his billboards for the last 30 years?
See, I don't think he has to. Because when you have that form of brand saturation, it's no longer about measuring the ROI. It's just being aware and in the market. All you have to do is be there.
But in
Whereas
order to do
have
that, you had to build the brand saturation.
Correct. And I think, though, that there were times probably, and for our listeners who don't know who we're talking about, Tim Misney is a personal injury attorney out of the Cuyahoga County, Cleveland market. And his catchphrase forever was, "I'll make them pay." And he had this eyebrow that would arch up and a finger that would point at people. And we're talking about the evolution of that brand being basically just pointing and eyebrows.
Yep.
You know?
And saying, you know what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
that's it.
Disney makes them pay. You know what I do.
nobody has any question
Yeah.
about what it is. When you reach that level of saturation, one of his previous high competitors would have been Elk and Elk in the market. And you remember, but how many people have seen Elk and Elk in the past couple years?
I haven't.
And so you're looking at somebody who's squeezing out competitors in a market who doesn't need to measure ROI on individual channels, just globally. He says, if I spend X amount of money, this many people come through the door. Plus, his market is not people necessarily built on relationships, not people built on direct conversions. His market is based upon people who need absolute urgent needs in the moment. And he just needs to be aware to them when that happens, because nobody plans to have that car accident. Nobody plans to have a personal injury. And so his market is a market of urgency. And so he just needs to be aware. And how many car accidents are there in Cuyahoga County every year? and the first person they're going to think of is eyebrow pointing man.
Yep.
I mean, I think I would argue that the people who need your services need to have the same type of story told to them. And that's what I don't see other law firms doing, or really any. I mean, he is the only one. So creating a very clear brand story, this is who we are, but break it down to individualized and like very themed. So we have a graphic designer on our team. His name is Nico. He's really, really good. I'm actually really excited to like show you guys some of the stuff we have rolling out for us. I was thinking about, when I was listening to you, I was thinking about like what kind of campaigns would Nico come up with, because you can create your own type of branding, and it's more than just Ken's face, because he's part of your brand right now.
That's a great face.
Nobody
though.
wants to see
It's a
my
great
face.
face.
I mean, everybody sees it every single week if you read.
Yeah. I apologize to all
I
the
think we should
listeners
put out
right
the
now.
magazine cover sometime.
I do too.
I
have you
don't think
ever
so.
seen the magazine cover we did of Ken?
I don't think so. What magazine?
Homes
Following
Man or
following
something
this podcast recording, you will get to see the GQ
I'll have to find it.
of Eques.
Was it like a coat slung over her shoulder?
Oh, no,
Basically.
no. It was the fixing the wristband of the watch. It was very good.
Yep.
Anyway, you could create that for yourself too. I think that's where you and I probably have a little bit of, we could go back and forth, because I think creating those stories in a smaller way that directly target, what I asked Morgan after we had a meeting with one of my content creators, and Chris was there, and we were kind of talking about this. Like, so everybody comes to find a lawyer because they're thinking about their relationship. They get a referral from somebody. So like they're going to call their parents or their aunt, uncle, or somebody who comes and works with you guys, right? So I said, Morgan, what would you do if you got in trouble and you didn't want your parents to know?
And this Gen Z.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's 21. So I was like, what if you got a DUI and you didn't want your parents to know? How would you find a lawyer? And she's like, well, I would never get a DUI. And I was like, okay, just follow me here. And she said she would go to Instagram. And I think she was serious about
Interesting.
that. I know. So for the generation coming up, like those 20 to 30-year-olds, and the way that we get business, relationships are harder. And even like, I think what we even trust from people, like, I say we, I'm in the middle, I'm 40, so relate, but I wouldn't count myself in that group. So like being able to paint the picture of this is what it's like when you pass away and you don't have a will, and in a very real way, and finding a way to maybe make that entertaining. Like that's not entertaining, but like talk about legal problems and like representing you as a business. I don't know. I have a million ideas. I think that there would be a way to pivot your create a separation, create a Tim Misney type branding for you on a very localized basis centered around your firms. But then some of that's going to take an investment, and it's not going to feel really good when you're like, oh, is the ROI what you want it to be right the second? But it is specifically with the branding plate. So that is with doing the billboards. That is with even like, Ken, I know you're in, you still run an ad in the Bargain Hunter all the time. And I'm sure that ROI, I mean, I know you get some leads off of that, but it's just very consistent. So if somebody knows that you're going to be in there and they're like, oh, somebody maybe local, like an Amish family that needs to find the phone number, all they know is they have to go to a Bargain Hunter to look it up, because it's been so consistent that you're in there. But like running TV, like those types of things, like that is a long branding play that really does work over time to build things up. And
I think this is great, because I think apart from the fact that the listeners don't want to hear us talk about the firm's marketing, I think you had just introduced the concept of something you talked about in there. And you said about the train, and I've always heard about the plane. You said the train takes a while to build up speed. And I've heard it said the plane takes more fuel to get off the ground than it does to keep flying.
yeah.
And so what is that magic formula that you bring to the table and that you guys think about? Because you're just talking to somebody, maybe they're in a rebrand, maybe they're realizing they're not spending or getting what they want out of their marketing. You're talking about retool or startup. It's expensive.
Oh my goodness. And it depends. I mean, so we try to meet business owners where they're at, because if you have a $500,000 or $1 million business, it's totally different than if you're running $10 million or more than that. So trying to come up with really creative solutions for a smaller budget is something that we try to do. But I don't think that there's a black and white solution for everybody that works. We see similar things that we know we can test and try, but like, for example, we are working with a shed company locally and their marketing is going really, really great. And we have worked with another company that does similar structures, but not sheds, other things, and like tiny homes. So it's not the same. And you would think it's very similar, but the challenges that industry it represents is something totally different. And the way they target it, like, do people in Ohio even want tiny homes at this point? So we try to customize what that plan is. And it's kind of what I talked about in the mastermind, is that we come up with a plan. We're going to test that and see if it works. We don't promise results because we can't promise that Google is going to keep exactly the same, or that your competition is going to stay exactly the same. But we can come up with what we think would be a really good, solid plan to try, test it, see what works, and change if we have to, increase budgets, change spend if we have to. And I think that's where, like, having somebody to really dig in beside you, like we always say, we're not going to promise results, but we promise we'll be beside you to figure it out as we go. And that's really what we try to do.
Yeah, I think the hard question for me is, like, what you talk about a train and taking some time. It's knowing, how do we figure out when something's working and we should, just be patient with it, and when should we say, you know what, we're not ever going to get there. We're just not building enough momentum. And so do you have a way? I mean, are you talking about like 6 months? Are you talking about years? Like, what should that look like if you're trying something new and you're like, well, we're not getting any results in the first few months? At what point do we need to move on? And at what point should we say, you know what, we've just got to be patient?
So 3 months is usually the minimum test time. If in 3 months we see results, but we see it trending the right way, but maybe, like, for example, let's say we were doing a streaming TV campaign, and after 3 months, your completion rate is a little bit lower than it should be, because you can test that, and your click-through rate. So, like, how many people are actually going to the website? Maybe the indicators are all lower than it should be. From our experience, that means that the creative needs changed. It's not necessarily, we could look at target demographic, but we usually can figure that out pretty closely depending on the message of the story at the beginning. So then it would be like, okay, well, we need to change the commercial and try it again for another 3 months. And if it doesn't work after 6 months, then we really pivot and change and move at that point. It really depends on the channel too. So, like, with digital ads and platforms, you can shift things a lot easier, quicker, pivot, all of those types of things. Those probably, we analyze those on a monthly basis, but overall, like, large budgets. So, like, I just had this conversation this week with a client. They're not 100% where they want to be yet. They have a lot. The weather is really around here for service-based businesses thrown businesses off, because it was so nice early, and then this happens. And buyer behavior is something also that cannot be measured. Like, there's psychology involved that we can't control. And so we can see how many people are searching for things online, but we can't control the fact that it's been raining for 3 weeks and nobody wants to think about doing the roof, getting their deck done, all of those types of things. So, we set a checkpoint in June. It's the half-year mark to say, are we hitting where we're at with the budget that we're at now? And they want to hit their goal. So their goal is not going to be to reduce budget. It's going to be, okay, we're willing to spend more if that's what we need to do, but we're going to choose to do that right before we get to halfway through the year. Because nothing is getting worse to September and you being like, you're 75% into the year and you're 25% to your goal, but you have zero time to make it up. Especially if you're in a seasonal business. It's totally different if you're in a retail business and you make up your business at the end of the year. But so there's no, like, black and white answer to that, really. Sure. I wish that there was. Maybe that's having the right person on your team who knows how to do that with you. And if you don't know the field well enough, being open to really, like, accepting that somebody else maybe has more experience with it. And, like, you guys know law really well. I would never argue with you about, like, things like that. But if you don't have as much experience running things yourselves, really, like, whether it's somebody who's on your team full time or just coming in and helping you audit things on a quarterly basis or whatever, just being an advisor, that can be really helpful. The same way everybody hires a business coach, maybe some businesses need a marketing coach. They want to have hands-on, and we're all about that because it actually makes your marketing results way better when you have somebody who wants to be really involved with it.
Yeah, thanks. That really does clarify some of that. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
So the problem becomes, and I know this from experience of starting multiple businesses, your cost percentages are way off in the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned it in there, and I was thinking as you were talking, I've always heard if you're spending 3%, you're risking shrinking. If you're spending 5%, you're probably going to be holding steady. If you're spending 7%, you're probably going to be growing, as a rough range for that. But starting up, I mean, I saw that with the restaurant. We were 13, 14% into marketing just because we were trying to get awareness out there, and we're still doing that, and we're still working on that. But the reality that I also recognized was this: that cost drops as sales go up because it doesn't necessarily have to increase proportionately as you grow, but that you find those places that are working. How do you work with clients who are worried about that up front? I mean, that's a significant chunk to say, I'm going to believe 6 months from now, this is going to matter, that I'm spending maybe a painful amount to make sure that I'm getting out there into the market.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's really difficult for me to get a client to 5%, but they're typically less educated that, they think they don't know what an industry standard is for how much they should be spending on marketing. They really don't. So I'm coming in with some fresh information, and often they're not tracking it well enough. So I would say this is an area that you guys probably do better in, and you understand it. So you need to measure those things. I would not say that's the average experience for most business owners. So it is really hard. I would say, based on my experience, what you said, those numbers are pretty close. Definitely, it's totally different if you're a $10 million company, you're going to spend 5% on marketing. That's a $500,000 budget. You're going to get more momentum than the $1 million company who only has $50,000 to spend on marketing. So sometimes those percentages need to be skewed a little bit depending on what the goal of the company is. And that's where we probably have a harder time. If you give me a $500,000 marketing budget and the 5% is like the hold steady, we could probably still get you a moderate amount of growth inside that budget. But it depends on how aggressive do you want to be? You want to grow by 30% each year? Then we probably need to push the limit. Are you comfortable growing with the 5 to 10% in proportion with your marketing budget? Then we can probably get those types of results for you. Also being very localized, like with geography and not spreading yourself too thin, we've seen really good things. So if we're working with a contractor who works in all of Northeast Ohio, I'll have them pick their top 3 cities. That way we can really go into those cities, grow their brand presence in those places first, because that allows us to give a full marketing experience. So they can have the branding and the lead generation, all of those things in one place. That way, you want everybody in that city to know who you are. Then you have come up with a repeatable system that works for that company. And you can take that and put it in other places then, because you see what works. Obviously, demographics change. If you go from Cleveland to Cadiz to Mansfield, they're totally different. So maybe some strategies change based on different markets. So you still always have to test that out a little bit. Print might work way better in a rural area than they would in the city, or vice versa. You just never know. So
this leads me to a follow-up question that, as an owner of multiple businesses, there is what you guys do. That is the, web-based marketing, the print marketing, the streaming, all of these mediums that you guys touch. How frustrating is it when you work with somebody who doesn't realize they are also responsible for getting out and pushing the brand on their own? The person is responsible for that. Now, I wouldn't throw any attorneys under the bus that I have, but there is sometimes a mentality that when we're in a business and you've got professionals and you've got service providers, your marketing is supposed to answer all of the needs that the business has. What do you do when you encounter somebody who goes, you guys aren't getting the results, and they're doing nothing on a relational level. They're doing nothing on a personal brand awareness level. They're not making a TikTok or they're doing a posts on their own, and they're putting all of that on you. I mean, is that fair?
That's a really, really hard. I mean, from a client relationship for us, that's really, really hard to navigate. This is where us having a really good relationship helps, because we're going to able to have some honesty in those conversations. I said marketing and sales are always held in tension with each other. So it could be, I mean, sales can be viewed as different things. It's networking. So at what point does your PR and networking fall into marketing versus sales or representation of the company? And there needs to be support there. I mean, I've also had conversations about closing. It's not our job as marketers to close your business. So if we bring all the opportunities to you and you're not able to do anything with it, I mean, our feet's held to the fire sometimes when it shouldn't be. And those are hard conversations to have. So definitely, especially in B2B too, like we see, and I've had to have those conversations. Hey, you want to grow in the commercial side of your business. We can do things to support you, but nothing is going to be better than you going out and building relationships, because so much about business to business is based off of that. You need to go out, be present, join the chambers, do all the things. And this is where, like, we had a company that we worked with, and they had 3 different salespeople, and they're all going all over different places. But they should have I recommended, and I really was like, really went toe to toe, and I didn't win, but I tried. Give your people geography, so that number one, they're not wasting their time driving, and they can really dig into those communities and become like a visible part of it. If you live in Holmes County, but you want to do business in Mansfield and Ashland, I know from experience working out there for 2 years, you really need to be out there. They want to trust local people. And I think that's fairly common, maybe less in bigger cities because they're so used to people being in and out all the time. But in some of the smaller communities, if you're not involved, they're not going to trust you as much. And that does help support your brand too, because if you're running a TV ad or you have a billboard, but they see the person on the street, it's just going to reinforce that you are a part of them. You feel local to them. So, I mean, you want me to go fight some battles with you?
No. It's okay. I don't need any backup on that one.
Yeah, well, I wanted to jump in and follow up. Chris, you talked a little bit about the ROI and how much you should be spending and having a percentage of the budget. I wanted to talk about what it looks like when someone is starting a business. How do you start that process with them? How do you figure out what needs they have, how you can help, and kind of what avenues you should be pursuing? Mm-hmm.
So we usually just really sit down and try to learn and understand what are they doing, what's different about them compared to their competitors. I don't know that we've worked with that many people other than like you in the restaurant from the ground up. Typically what will happen is they'll want a website because they know they need that. And that's where we can start by building their relationship. We do, I think, when they're working with us, then they get to kind of experience, because I'm not going to just we're not order takers. So I'm not going to be like, oh, you want a website? Okay, great. Here you go. And that's it. We're going to ask more questions than that. But in my experience, they really do have a hard time allocating money towards that because they don't understand it. So if somebody was willing to sit with us and say, okay, what should I be doing? What I see typically happen is they generate some revenue, maybe get to that $500,000 mark on their own, just off of relationships and pushing it themselves. And then they realize they need to push to get to the next level. And that's the point where they're really like, okay, we need to invest in some marketing support at this point. We have talked to many startups. The reality is most of the time they can't afford the outside support. We've even tried to customize, because we do consulting. So we will do let's do it with you type thing. So you don't know what to do with social media. We create a plan where basically during 6 months, we'll start off doing it for you and we phase ourselves out, but we're there for support. That way you can learn how to do it on your own. Not every part of marketing can you really do that. Like I would never do that with Google Ads for somebody, or even there's other things that just wouldn't make sense to do that. But social media is something that business owners could do themselves. And I know from being a business owner, it's really hard. If it was up to me to do our social right now, we would never have anything on there. So we try to treat our own marketing the way that we would, like we have somebody on the team that's totally dedicated to doing that. Because at the beginning it was up to me and Natalie, and we just kind of we were really, I mean, we still posted, but we were inconsistent compared to what we would recommend to our clients. So does that answer your question?
It does. I was just trying to figure out what a new business should look at and how they should approach it as far as meeting with you and trying to figure out what information they need to bring to the table.
I mean, so bare minimum, a business should go ahead and set up all of their profiles, set up a Google My Business, and have a website. That way there's a place for people to go validate who they are. And they seem more legit. If you look up somebody and they're not on Google and they don't have a website, immediately you're kind of like, even if you're getting a referral from somebody else, if you can't find them online, nobody trusts anybody anymore. So like least untrusted people, car dealers, roofers, marketers. Where's lawyers fall into that?
I'm sure we're on the list
right
somewhere.
there someplace. So this is a great conversation, Ken, because last March, so March of 2022, before we opened the restaurant, a full 6 months ahead in advance of that, we actually met with Lindsey and Natalie, the partners at the restaurant, and we said, this is what we want to be. And I realized everybody starting up a business doesn't have the ability to treat it like a full investment. Mm-hmm. They're usually starting this and they need this to generate revenue in order for that to sustain them personally or their families. And so it can be really a hard thing to say best practices is meet with a marketing coach before you're going, because the brand consistency month over month is something that starts to build from that very first impression. And so even from building our logos to building the website to saying this is our social media strategies, those things are hard to do, especially when that person starting is like, I'm wearing every hat. I'm literally making money to eat. Off of. And so the idea of spending even on, an attorney for setting up your contracts right or your marketing to set things up right, it is a hard thing. And, one of my recommendations is don't start until you have that investment ready, because you don't get but one chance to start right.
I mean, I just in knowing you for the last couple of years, so we've grown a lot. Our staff has grown a lot. And honestly, it's because of you. Did you know that?
No, she's tired of dealing with me personally, and I keep cycling through people, so she keeps having to hiring new people to deal with me.
I know, he's so difficult. I'm looking at you, Tyler.
Oh, I'm so difficult?
No, Chris, I'm looking for some more.
I'm not going to validate that.
I'm sorry that one of our people had a baby and we had to switch people.
It's unacceptable.
Yeah. They should have planned that better.
No, but you talk about investing in the business. Like you wrote your bootstrapping book. You can't do it on your own. Like there's a support network there. And really, I think I attribute a lot of our growth to listening to people like you. I look to the experience around me. What's working, what's not working, hiring people to support. So do you have the fulfillment? We could have stayed small and kept it that way, but we have a business model that I think is attractive to people, but we need to have the ability to fulfill the work so that we don't fall short on the service promise that we have. And you said, hire people who do it better than you.
Yep.
You said that. So that's kind of it's that part for us has been very scary. Okay, we're going to hire somebody else, not only because of the expense to us, but we had an employee move from Texas.
Yeah.
He moved his family up here and we're literally we're doing Zoom interviews and we're like, are you sure you want to do this? Do you know what you're getting into? Yeah. And if I could count how many times he's been sitting in a client meeting and people are like, why did you move to Ohio? We're like, for us, no big deal.
Yeah.
So growing, being willing to invest in your business upfront. And I don't think that people always understand the scope of what it's going to take, the energy, the effort, the time. And everybody says it's so hard, but you don't really know. So if you can surround yourself with people who have been through it before, I've been around you. I've watched my sister and brother-in-law start a winery and all the blood, sweat, and tears that they put into that. I was in an environment where I was with a bunch of entrepreneurial guys who started businesses left and right all the time. They were never scared to jump out, invest in something new. And honestly, one time they had a big failure, and that was a really hard thing, but that does happen. But they didn't stop. They did, what's the worst case scenario? Okay, this fails. We survive, we move on, and we do something else. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds super simplified. I know sometimes it can be more devastating than that. But the reality is you still have life. You still have, there's still other opportunities. And the quicker you can shift from those types of things and move on, So taking a leap of faith, going out and going after it. I mean, both with marketing, with business, with growing, with all those things. If you limit yourself with what you think you can do, then you're going to be limited.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I think is common between attorneys and marketers is the level of insight that our clients often have into what we're doing. And so it can be a little bit like the wizard behind the curtain. They don't know what we know, and they don't see what levers are available to pull. And marketers can, in the some same way as some bad faith lawyers, take advantage of that.
100%.
Yeah.
We even see that happening to the legal profession from outside marketing groups. We saw, there was a lady who came to me and she said, boy, Chris, just don't know. I feel great about my marketing. I'm paying $1,800 a month. And I said, for what? And I was like curious if they were doing ads. Oh, they're just doing my Google business page.
What?
Yep.
I know. I have heard stuff.
I've seen it dozens of times like that.
And it's just this idea that I can't know about this stuff.
I think we definitely saw that, and we see people, Amish people, being taken advantage of in our community too. I've heard stories of businesses paying $500 a month for their website hosting. Like, that's it. They're not getting anything else, which is astronomical. There's no reason that you should be paying that much for website hosting. I mean, that's definitely the heart of who we are. And not every single one is like that, but I can't stand, that makes my skin crawl. Like, just to know that that's out there, that's the reason we are in business in the first place. Like, again, like, that's why we don't promise things, because you typically see promises in those situations. We promise we'll get you to #1 on Google. We promise that you'll never need another website. That's not realistic. That's not honest at all. So, yeah.
No, and that's one thing I would go in to say. As much as Ken's been a part of the team, I see Ken work with clients and explain the process and make them, if they want to, participants. Because some clients just want us to take care of it. As a person who's experienced working with you and Natalie, and the team members that will work with me because I'm so difficult, is that same level of care in going, if you want to talk about this and you want to know what's going on, we'll go deep dive on this and be a participant in it. And that in and of itself, as much as Lindsey and I will snipe at each other whenever we get a chance, that is one of the things about Fierce that I appreciate so much, is that you guys actively engage people in not just providing services, but providing understanding about what's going on. And that's really cool. So, and I'm sorry that this is recorded, because now they have me saying nice things about Lindsey.
Yep.
I force you to meet with me once a month, whether you want to or
That's
not, so
right.
we can discuss results.
I feel like that goes a long way, though. If you can explain to someone where your cost is, how you're going to help them. I don't know. I do that with clients all the time, and I always feel like I'm oversharing. And I feel like, I don't know if it's like a little imposter syndrome, where I feel like I'm like, they don't care about this. I feel weird not explaining to them where they're spending their money.
Yeah.
I will say the only clients that I feel like don't care, and maybe it's not that they don't care, it is sort of an anomaly, is the wedding industry.
Oh,
Yeah, that's totally
Because
different.
the market's so crazy that you can pretty much charge whatever you want, and no one really asks why.
right.
I charge half of what I have a friend who charges double what I do, and we do the same thing. I have
Maybe
a ton
you
of.
should be charging more, Tyler.
I should be charging more, but I also do way more weddings than him.
And that's free advice, by the way. Charge
Yeah.
more.
Okay, but would it be better to work less and make more money? That's why your
So
friend's
I
charging
agree.
more.
I agree, but it's way less.
Okay, but weddings are hard.
Yeah,
That's a lot of work.
But in my mind, and I don't want to give away too much either, because I don't want people to be like, "Well, why am I paying you this money?" I feel like there is a system to everything, and I feel like I have figured out the system to weddings that it does not stress me out like I know how it stresses other people out.
But you have to give up Saturdays with your family.
I agree, and that's why I will never charge less than I do. Is because if I'm just breaking it down by time, it's this much money.
I don't know how much you charge, so I can't really say. But what I'm afraid I'm hearing from you, and what I actually hear from creatives all the time, which is where I feel like I bring good balance to our team, is if you do something that you do really well, you undervalue it because you think it's easy for everybody else, and it's not. So like really understanding, and you know, with weddings, it's like they care about their day. It's a totally different buying experience. But the level of experience that you have, the fact that you do make it smooth and you do has a system makes it actually even more valuable than somebody else because it's probably going to go better. Yeah.
I like to think that I'm in a middle of the road price. I know guys who charge way less than me and should be charging more or shouldn't be doing it at all, one or the other. And people who are charging twice as much as I am, and I don't think they should be charging that, but they are because they add a different, like a bougie name at the end of it or something like that. And people are like, oh, this is worth this much money, and they pay it. And yeah, I like to think I'm in the middle, but I probably do need to up my costs, but I don't know. It's been a consistent 5 years of doing the same amount of weddings each year. And each year I've bumped it a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I almost feel bad charging more because I don't think it should be that much money.
That's the thing. You feel bad charging more. You should not feel bad.
Yeah.
We're not the most expensive company out there either, but we're not the cheapest for sure.
That's kind of where I'm at.
What you get is, I would say we're probably in the 50 to 75% range. When Jordan was talking about website costs this morning, I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
I know really big companies spend $50,000 on their website, but if you're not, most of the companies that I know that do that aren't actually big enough to justify that big of a cost.
If it's not an Amazon setup type website.
I mean, I can think of big companies locally that would qualify. Walnut Creek Foods, like, $1 billion Weaver. I mean, they have a bunch of different websites. They're big businesses. That's totally different. And they're running, Walnut Creek's not running e-commerce, but maybe they are on the wholesale side on the back end, those types of things. So, that's a different setup, but for like Eques or a typical contractor in the area to be spending, and I know that happens all the time. And I think I can relate to that because I'm like, you really don't need to spend that much. Right. It doesn't, like you can get a really good product for much less than that. It's just, they have inflated their value, but they've done whoever's selling that has done a good job building their brand, and maybe, they do less projects than we do. I don't know. I relate too much, I think, to being a business owner to be like, I don't think that I would ever spend that much, but can we make a fair investment where we are going to make enough money? It's super important to us because we have people moving, we're investing in the team. We're investing in the long run. I'm not trying to just make money today. I want a company that's going to be here for 20 years.
Right.
So that takes overhead coverage.
Well, to all of this, I mean, I feel like we could probably go for another solid 40 minutes because, talking about pricing and how that fits into your marketing, talking about aiming small. We could probably, but for the sake of time today, we're probably going to need to wrap this up. So, Lindsey, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It was so fun.
And on behalf of Ken and Tyler, this is Chris White, and you've been listening to Basic Business Advice.